Elara wasn't searching for anything. Not that night, at least. The attic had long been a refuge for her. A place where the world's chaos seemed to fade into the scent of aged wood and forgotten paper. She liked the quiet hum of solitude it offered, the way it seemed to breathe secrets if she listened closely enough. But secrets, she would learn, have a way of calling to those who least expect them. The map was hidden within an unassuming chest, buried beneath layers of brittle, moth-eaten fabric. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. The vellum was ancient yet unmarred by time, its surface impossibly smooth, as though untouched by human hands. The ink, a strange silvery hue, shifted and shimmered when caught by the dim light of the attic's single bulb. But it was the sound that held her still. A faint, persistent whisper, barely audible, like a breeze slipping through the cracks of an old door. It wasn't coming from the walls or the floor. It was coming from the map. Elara hesitated, her fingers hovering above its surface. The whispers grew louder, as if sensing her presence. They weren't words, not exactly, but something deeper, an invitation wrapped in a promise, laced with danger. Against her better judgment, she touched it. The moment her fingertips brushed the map, the world around her shifted. The attic dissolved into shadows, and in its place appeared an image so vivid she could almost feel the cool breeze brushing her cheeks. An island, suspended in the sky, its edges wreathed in golden light, floated serenely above an endless expanse of clouds. There were creatures there, darting through the air, small winged figures and scaled beasts that gleamed like gemstones. The whispers swirled around her, forming a single haunting phrase. The hidden island of Whisperwinds awaits. Elara gasped and pulled her hand away. The vision vanished, and she was back in the attic, her heart racing. The map now lay silent, its ink still once more. But the image of the floating island remained seared into her mind. Whisperwinds, she murmured aloud, testing the word. It felt heavy, significant, as though it had always been meant for her. Her eyes scanned the map again, noting the intricate paths etched across its surface. They twisted and turned, eventually converging into a single, glowing point. A faint symbol, a compass, was drawn there, alongside a cryptic phrase in elegant script. Find the forgotten compass. The way is veiled without it. Questions flooded her mind. Who had created this map? How had it ended up here, in her attic, of all places? And what was Whisperwinds? Yet amidst the confusion, a quiet certainty settled in her chest. She had to follow the map. Her curiosity outweighed her fear. She carefully rolled the map and tucked it into her satchel, already knowing that sleep would elude her that night. The map had called to her, and though she didn't yet understand why, she felt an unshakable pull toward the mysterious island. As she climbed down from the attic, she paused at the threshold, glancing back at the now empty chest. The air felt heavier, charged with a sense of foreboding. In the days that followed, the whispers began to haunt her, weaving through her dreams and brushing against the edges of her waking thoughts. They grew louder each time she touched the map, urging her forward, their urgency impossible to ignore. And so, with her satchel packed and her resolve firm, Elara set out to uncover the location of the forgotten compass. Little did she know, the journey would unravel not just the secrets of Whisperwinds, but also the buried truths of her own soul. The first steps of the miraculous journey had been taken. The world, it seemed, had begun to shift around her. The hidden island awaited, and the whispers would guide her, whether she was ready or not. The forest loomed before Elara, ancient and unyielding. Its trees stretched skyward like silent sentinels, their gnarled roots twisting through the earth like veins. This was the place the map had led her to, the forest of veils, shrouded in mist that seemed alive, shifting and curling as though it had secrets to guard. The whispers had been insistent during her journey here, their fragmented murmurs guiding her through winding roads and hidden trails. Yet now, standing at the edge of the forest, they fell silent, as if even they dared not disturb the sanctity of this place. The first step into the forest felt like crossing a threshold into another world. The air was thick and damp, carrying the faint scent of moss and rain-soaked wood. Light filtered through the canopy above, fractured into shards by the dense foliage. Every sound, her breath, the crunch of leaves beneath her boots, seemed amplified as though the forest was listening. Elara's gaze flickered to the map in her hands. The ink glowed faintly, forming a path that wove through the trees. She followed it, her heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and dread. Hours passed, though it felt like days. The deeper she ventured, the more the forest seemed to shift. Trails disappeared, only to reappear moments later in different places. Shadows danced at the edges of her vision, and the occasional rustle of leaves made her pause, her grip tightening on the satchel that held the map. It was near dusk when she stumbled upon it, a small weathered cottage nestled in a clearing. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, and the faint scent of herbs lingered in the air. The map's glow dimmed, as though signaling she had arrived. The door creaked open before she could knock. A figure stood in the doorway, cloaked in shadows. "You've come," the voice said, a low, rasping tone that carried an air of inevitability. The figure stepped into the light, revealing a wiry old man with eyes like molten gold. He was draped in layers of tattered fabric, each piece adorned with symbols Elara couldn't decipher. "I am the keeper," he said simply. "And you seek the compass?" Elara nodded, unable to find her voice. The keeper studied her for a long moment, his piercing gaze seeming to weigh her very soul. Finally, he stepped aside, motioning for her to enter. The inside of the cottage was dimly lit, its walls lined with shelves cluttered with jars, scrolls, and strange trinkets. In the center of the room, atop a pedestal, rested the compass. It was unlike any she had ever seen. A disk of obsidian encircled by a ring of shimmering starlight. Its needle spun lazily, as though caught in an unseen current. "Take it," the keeper said, his voice softer now. "If you are worthy." Elara hesitated. "Worthy? What do you mean?" The keeper's lips curved into a faint smile. "A riddle guards its power. Answer correctly, and it will serve you. Fail, and the forest will claim you." Her breath caught in her throat, but she nodded. "What's the riddle?" The keeper's gaze deepened, and he recited in a voice that seemed to echo through the room. "When the stars weep and the ocean sings, what is the truth that only silence brings?" The words hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. Elara's mind raced, piecing together fragments of meaning. The stars weeping, rain, tears, the ocean singing, waves. Silence. What truth could silence hold? She paced the room, the keeper watching silently. Her thoughts spiraled until exhaustion forced her to sit, head in her hands. It was then, in the stillness, that clarity began to form. Silence, reflection. The truth wasn't something external, it was within. The answer wasn't a word, but an understanding. She straightened, meeting the keeper's gaze. Silence brings truth because it allows us to listen. To ourselves, to the world, to what's hidden beneath the noise, she said, her voice steady. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the compass glowed, its needle stilling to point directly at her. The keeper smiled, a glint of approval in his eyes. "You've answered well. The compass is yours." Elara stepped forward, her hands trembling as she lifted the compass from its pedestal. The moment she held it, warmth spread through her, and the needle spun once more before settling in a fixed direction. "The way to Whisperwinds is open," the keeper said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But tread carefully. Miracles always demand a price." Elara left the cottage, the compass clutched tightly in her hand. As the forest shifted behind her, she couldn't shake the keeper's final words. The path ahead was clear now, but the true journey had only just begun. The ocean stretched endlessly before her, its surface a canvas of silver and shadow under the light of a crescent moon. The compass sat on the deck beside her, its needle steady, pointing unwaveringly toward the horizon. Elara's ship, a modest vessel with sails worn by the wind, cut through the water with a determination that mirrored her own. She had been at sea for days, though the time felt immeasurable. The compass had been her only guide, its needle defying logic as it directed her farther and farther from known waters. She felt untethered, as though the world she had left behind was fading into a distant memory. It was on the 5th night that the storm came. It began as a whisper, a faint rustling of the wind that sent ripples across the water. Then the sky darkened, clouds gathering like ink spilled across the heavens. The air grew heavy, charged with an energy that prickled against her skin. The compass began to hum, its glow intensifying, as though urging her onward. The first wave struck without warning, nearly capsizing the ship. Elara clung to the wheel, her knuckles white as she fought to keep the vessel on course. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the roiling sea in stark, fleeting glimpses. The wind screamed and the rain lashed against her face. But the compass remained resolute, its needle pointing to a place she could not yet see. Hours passed in a blur of chaos and determination. Elara's body ached, her mind teetering on the edge of exhaustion, but she refused to falter. She had come too far to turn back. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the storm ceased. The silence was deafening, broken only by the gentle lapping of waves against the hull. Elara slumped against the wheel, her breath ragged. As the clouds parted, the first light of dawn revealed what lay ahead. It was impossible. The island floated above the ocean, its edges shimmering like a mirage. It was vast, its peaks crowned with golden mist that seemed to glow from within. Waterfalls cascaded from its cliffs, their streams dissolving into nothingness before reaching the sea. The air around it was alive with movement. Figures darting through the skies, their forms too distant to discern. The compass's hum grew louder, almost jubilant, as if celebrating her arrival. Elara adjusted the sails, steering the ship toward a column of light descending from the island to the ocean's surface. It was a path, impossibly narrow, that rose into the clouds. The moment her ship entered the light, she felt a strange weightlessness. The vessel lifted from the water, its creaking wood protesting against this newfound defiance of gravity. Slowly, steadily, it ascended, drawn toward the island above. When the ship touched down on the soft moss-covered ground, Elara stepped off cautiously, her boots sinking slightly into the earth. The air was warm, fragrant with the scent of wildflowers and something sweeter, indescribable. The inhabitants appeared as if summoned by her arrival. Fairies, their wings iridescent and delicate as spider silk, emerged from the trees, their laughter a melody that seemed to resonate with the land itself. They hovered around her, their curious gazes taking in every detail. Baby dragons soon followed, their scales reflecting the sunlight in hues of emerald, sapphire, and ruby. They moved with an almost childlike playfulness, their eyes bright with intelligence. Yet, as wondrous as the scene was, Elara felt a subtle undercurrent of sorrow. A fairy, her wings adorned with golden patterns that glimmered like constellations, stepped forward. She introduced herself as Lisara, one of the island's guardians. Her voice was soft, but her words carried a weight that stilled the others. You are the first to reach Whisperwinds in centuries, Elara said. And perhaps the last. Elara frowned. What do you mean? Lysara's gaze shifted to the horizon, where a faint shadow lurked, darker than the clouds. The balance that keeps our island afloat is fragile. Something stirs beyond the veil, threatening to unravel all that we protect. We hoped your arrival might be the miracle we need. The fairies and dragons looked at Elara with a mix of hope and desperation. She felt the weight of their expectations settling heavily on her shoulders. What can I do? She asked, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions within her. Elara hesitated before replying. The bond between our kind and the dragons is sustained by an ancient song, a melody that we have forgotten. Without it, the island will fall and all who dwell here will vanish. Elara's pulse quickened. The whispers had led her here. But now the path ahead was veiled in uncertainty. As the sun rose higher, casting its golden light across the island, she knew there was no turning back. Whisperwinds had chosen her, and its fate was now entwined with her own. The heart of Whisperwinds was not a place, but a melody. Or so the fairies told her. Yet the melody was lost, scattered among fragments of memory and echoes too faint to grasp. As Elara stood beneath the ancient trees of the island, their branches entwined like veins of some great living being, she felt the weight of its silence. The fairies guided her to a grove at the island's center. Here, the air shimmered with latent magic, and the ground was carpeted with flowers that seemed to hum softly when touched by the wind. It was said that the song had first been sung here, a binding of harmony between the fairies and dragons. We no longer remember the tune, Elara admitted, her golden wings drooping slightly. Only fragments remain, notes carried by the breeze, echoes within the caverns. Without the full melody, the balance of Whisperwinds will unravel. Elara felt the compass in her hand, its faint warmth a reminder of its purpose. If the song is scattered, then I'll find the pieces, she said. A murmur of hope rippled through the fairies. Elara nodded and gestured toward the horizon. The caverns to the west hold the echoes. Perhaps they will guide you. The path to the caverns was treacherous. The land became wilder as she ventured westward, with jagged cliffs and roaring waterfalls that seemed to guard the secrets within. Lyric, the baby dragon who had taken to following her since her arrival, trailed at her side. Lyric was a curious companion. His scales shimmered like moonlight on water, and his playful chirps lightened the heaviness of her journey. Yet, there was something else. At night, when he drifted to sleep curled beside her, he hummed softly. It was not a full melody, but a string of notes that tugged at her heart, haunting and beautiful. When they reached the caverns, Elara paused at the entrance. The air was cooler here, carrying a faint reverberation, as though the stones themselves were singing. She stepped inside, lyric at her heels, their footsteps echoing against the smooth walls. Deep within the caverns, she found the first fragment. It came not as a sound, but a sensation, a pull in her chest, as if the very air carried a memory. She closed her eyes and listened, letting the faint notes seep into her mind. They were mournful, yearning, yet incomplete. As she moved deeper, the fragments grew clearer, weaving together into a pattern. Lyric began to hum softly, his voice harmonizing with the echoes around them. Elara watched in awe as the young dragon's eyes glimmered, his connection to the song undeniable. The final fragment lay in a crystalline chamber at the cavern's heart. Here, the walls pulsed with light, each pulse carrying a single resonant note. Elara reached out, her hand brushing the surface of the crystal. The notes surged into her, filling her mind with a melody so profound it brought tears to her eyes. It was a song of unity, of balance, of the bond between beings who had chosen to trust one another. She understood now why it had been forgotten. The melody was not just sung, it was felt. A harmony that could only exist when souls were bound in trust. When Elara and Lyric returned to the grove, the fairies and dragons gathered in a quiet circle, their faces filled with anticipation. Lysara stepped forward, her wings trembling. "Do you have it?" she asked. Elara nodded, but her gaze fell on Lyric. "It's not mine to sing alone. The song belongs to both of us." She knelt beside the dragon, her hand resting on his head. Together, they began. The melody started softly, a delicate thread of sound that wove through the air. Lyric's voice joined hers, and the harmony grew, resonating with a power that made the ground tremble. The fairies added their voices, their laughter turning into a chorus of crystalline notes. The dragons roared softly, their deep tones grounding the melody. The island responded. The trees swayed as though in rhythm, the waterfalls sang, and the golden mist above brightened into a dazzling glow. The bond between fairies and dragons rekindled with every note, their unity restoring the balance that had been on the brink of collapse. When the last note faded, a profound stillness fell over Whisperwinds. The grove pulsed with life, its magic renewed. The fairies and dragons embraced, their joy unspoken but palpable. Lysara approached Elara, her eyes shining with gratitude. "You've done what we could not. You've given us back our song." Elara smiled, though her heart ached with the knowledge that her time here was drawing to an end. Whisperwinds was safe, but the whispers that had guided her hinted at one final truth yet to be revealed. The miracle was complete, or so she thought. The song lingered in the air, its echoes weaving through the golden mist that cloaked Whisperwinds. Elara stood in the grove, the melody still vibrating within her chest. The fairies and dragons had begun to scatter, their laughter and calls filling the island with a sense of life and renewal. Yet for Elara, a strange unease had taken root. The compass in her satchel had grown cold. Its needle, once vibrant and alive, now lay still, pointing not to the horizon but directly at her. The keeper's words echoed in her mind. A miracle demands a price. Elara approached her, the fairy's golden wings glinting softly in the fading light. "You've done what we could not," she said, her voice gentle. "The bond is restored, and Whisperwinds will endure." Elara wanted to believe her, but something in the air felt wrong. It was subtle, like a thread pulled too tight, threatening to unravel. "Why do I feel like it's not over?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lysara's expression shifted, a flicker of hesitation crossing her face. The island exists because of the bond. Its magic is tied to harmony, but also to sacrifice. The keeper warned you, did he not? Elara nodded, her pulse quickening. "He said there's always a price. What is it?" The fairy hesitated before answering, her gaze falling to the ground. "The song restores balance, but to sustain it, the island must remain hidden. Whisperwinds cannot exist alongside the world beyond the clouds. By bringing the song back, you have awakened the island's final truth." The ground beneath them trembled slightly, a soft rumble that felt like a heartbeat. Around them, the golden mist began to shimmer, its light flickering like the last breath of a dying star. "The island is leaving," Lysara continued. "Its magic is drawing it away, back into the veil where it belongs, and so too must all who dwell here." Elara's chest tightened. "You're saying Whisperwinds is vanishing?" The fairy nodded solemnly. "It is the way it has always been. We are protectors of something too fragile for the outside world. Now that the bond is restored, the island will fade into myth once more." The realization struck Elara like a wave. Whisperwinds had never been meant to endure in the way she had hoped. Its beauty, its magic was fleeting, like a dream that could not survive the harshness of waking. Around her, the fairies and dragons began to change. Their forms grew translucent, their laughter softening into whispers. Lyric stood at her side, his gaze steady, as though he understood what was happening. Elara knelt beside him, her hand resting against his gleaming scales. "Is this goodbye?" she asked, her voice trembling. Lyric pressed his head against her palm, a warmth radiating from him that filled her with both sorrow and solace. He hummed a single note, a fragment of the song they had sung together. It was his way of saying farewell. As his form began to fade, he left behind a single scale, its surface shimmering with all the colors of the dawn. Elara clutched it tightly, tears streaming down her face. The island itself began to dissolve, the trees, the waterfalls, and the golden mist unraveling into threads of light. The compass in her satchel glowed faintly one last time, its needle spinning before stilling completely. The fairies and dragons vanished into the light, their forms becoming one with the magic of the island. Elara was the last to fade, her wings folding gently as she whispered, "Thank you, Elara, for everything." When Elara opened her eyes, she was adrift on calm waters. The ship rocked gently beneath her, the horizon stretching endlessly in all directions. The map and compass lay beside her, lifeless and ordinary now, as though the magic that had infused them had evaporated. In her hand she still held Lyric's scale. It pulsed faintly, a reminder of all she had witnessed and lost. She stared out at the sea, her heart heavy with the knowledge that Whisperwinds was gone. Yet in her sorrow, she felt a quiet sense of wonder. The island might have vanished, but its miracles lingered in her memory, in her heart, and in the single note that seemed to echo through the air whenever she closed her eyes. On clear nights when the stars wept and the ocean sang, she would hear it. The melody of bonded souls, a harmony that defied time and space. And though no one would ever believe her story, Elara knew the truth. Whisperwind was more than a place. It was a miracle, a fleeting, fragile thing that had chosen her to carry its light into the world. The whispers had ceased, but their song would never fade.